Hi there, I'm Dr. Emma DeMarco, and this is the Unmusical Podcast. Today's episode is with orchestral violinist and artistic director Monica Curro. Well, thank you so much, Monica, for coming on to the podcast today. I'm very, very excited to chat with you. You actually are the first orchestral musician of the season, so I'm very, very excited to chat about that. But why don't you start by just telling me a little bit about yourself and your career so far?
Well, I am 56 years old, so I've been around for a while. So that means I've done quite a few things, I guess. Yes, I'm mainly 100% an orchestral musician. That's the way I see myself. I've been working professionally since I was 18 years old. So that's definitely my core activity and the bulk of my experience. But just in the last 5 years, 6 years, I've really branched out and done so many more things. It's really interesting. You get to a point playing in an orchestra where after decades of playing the same Tchaikovsky symphonies, and we usually only play 3 of them, and the same everything, then you just think, I think there might be more to life.
Sure, I can understand that.
As great as they are.
Yeah.
So, lately I've gone into artistic directorship at the Port Fairy Spring Music Festival and the the Women in Music Festival that was started in 2018. And I curate a really gorgeous series at McClelland Sculpture Park and Gallery just before Frankston, almost out of Melbourne, but just in Melbourne. Mm-hmm. That's an incredible series, 10 concerts a year. And so I can hire all my friends and colleagues and give them a bit of extra work, especially after COVID. And I do all kinds of things like that. It's really interesting. It's especially because, you have a kid and the kid all of a sudden is gone. She's gone to Townsville to do marine science.
Oh, wow. Not music?
Yes. I seriously counseled her against music.
Oh, wow.
Oh, it's pretty tough. You know what it's like.
It is.
Especially in this country, which doesn't really, most artists in this country of all disciplines live on or below the poverty line. So when you're advising your child what to do for their life and they don't really show an interest in music, there's no point
pushing them towards it.
Screaming at them to practice their scratchy violin or whatever. It's just not a good idea. No. So she's going to be a marine scientist. So, I guess my point is when the kids grow up, then you've got all this time and headspace there's all this room in your brain and in your timetable, and you think, well, what else is out there? What else can I do? What else am I interested in? How can I kind of help? Because I've had so much help. Your whole kind of philosophical paradigm shifts. Yep. So that it goes from me, my career, how can I get better and get more established and get more work, to, how can I make sure that the next generation is supported and give them opportunities? And so I guess that whole shift has happened in the last 6 years for me.
Oh, wow, that's really exciting. I always find it interesting hearing performers talk about how they're getting into curation and directorships and producing. And I always love to ask, do you consider yourself a bit of a slashy, a performer / producer / whatnot? Or do you like to think of yourself as just one thing, just an instrumentalist?
No. I used to think of myself as that. I really did. But
just just a violinist.
Yeah. But now... Well, orchestral player, a chamber musician, a teacher, a tutor, a mentor, everything was violin or viola related.
Okay.
But now that's probably getting less than half of what I do is playing the violin.
Wow, that's a big shift.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a great shift.
Yes, I can see. You seem so inspired just talking about it.
Well, it hurts. Can you imagine spending your life like this? Like in a seat that you can't get up from in a rehearsal.
Yep.
At one's age, it really starts to hurt.
Oh, I feel at my age, I'm already noticing some little neck things and some things in my wrists from saxophone, and I'm, getting into my 30s now, and I think musicians' health was something that was just being discussed as I was going through uni, and it's a lot better now, definitely, how people talk about health and managing your playing and managing your body as a player. That's
definitely. Yeah. We just used to medicate.
Medicate?
That's all we used to do. We didn't talk about it. You just medicated.
Just expected to play. Yeah, just expected to play, and it doesn't matter what else is going on.
Yeah, but you didn't really talk about it to anybody else either. It's much different now.
Yeah, that culture has definitely shifted. I feel like, my generation coming through is definitely talking about it and has gotten better at actually dealing with it, at least.
Definitely, not just the physical health, but the mental health as well.
Yeah. Oh,
stresses
definitely.
And the anxieties and it's associated with performance at any level, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of like the physical and mental side of being an orchestral musician, this podcast has musical listeners and non-musical listeners that are just interested. So can you describe what is it actually like to be a member of the orchestra and be part of such a big team every day?
The most common misconception, like when you get in the Uber and they say, "Oh, what's in the box?" and you say, "It's a violin." And they say, "Wow, where do you play?" And you say, "I play in the Melbourne Symphony." And they say, "Oh, you must be so good, but what do you do for a living?"
No, they don't.
Yep. Across the board.
What?
Yeah, there's a perception that if you're any kind of artist in this country, you're a hobbyist.
Wow.
Unless you're, pop star. That everyone's heard of.
I feel like everyone's heard of the MSO, though. I feel like that at the very least, people should hear that you're a player in that orchestra and that carries some weight or something.
No, check your bubble, Emma. Check it.
my musician's bubble.
Musician's bubble, your middle class bubble, your who you surround yourself with, how you've led your life, how you're brought up. Check it. Yeah. Most people. We live in the margin being artists, and then we live in the margin of the margin being classical artists. So just because things are so real and so true to you, there's just most people don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. But anyway, to finish the Uber story, after they say, "What do you do for a living?" and then you can choose whether to go into the fact that I have a job for life, long service leave, maternity leave, sick leave, bereavement leave, moving house leave.
Wow.
Etc. Yep. Amazing conditions like the old public service. Then they say, or you didn't bother saying all of those things and you just said, well, I'm a merchant banker, and then you get out of the Uber. But no, then they say, wow, you must be so creative. And this is a long way of answering your question, which is to be in a symphony orchestra, you cannot be at the least creative. You can be socially creative or politically creative, but you think about it, it's like a military hierarchy. It's like a chain of command with the general being the usually dead white male composer.
Okay.
And then the conductor, who's the conduit, hopefully, of, how to best express the message of the composer to the audience. And then you've got a concert master, and then you've got various levels of middle management, which I am because I'm an assistant principal second violin for 26 years. And then you've got the troops, and most of the time I'm one of the troops because you have to choose you've got to choose your battles. If you've got a thing that you really care about, like a bowing or a bit of phrasing, or you want to know the length of a note or something, you can't be putting your hand up every 3 seconds because it's not efficient. That's not the way it works.
Not with that many people in the room.
That's exactly right. So how do 80 to 100 people play exactly together? Well, I mean, it's a mysterious thing, isn't it? But it can't happen with everyone sitting there in the second violins being creative and thinking, I think this phrase goes like this. No, that doesn't happen. Yeah. It's all about, falling in line.
Yeah, I find it really interesting too to get your perspective because, I've played in an orchestra as a saxophonist, as someone who comes in and maybe has an 8-bar solo and then doesn't do much else for the rest of the day. But, there's only one of me there, play the old castle and you get featured for that movement and then you have no more input. But having 10 saxophones in the room, having 12, having 18, whatever it would just be such a bizarre and different experience in terms of understanding my place artistically within this group of everyone playing the same notes and the same dots.
I guess the closest comparison for you would be a big band.
Yeah, something like that.
Maynard Ferguson style big bands.
Yeah. I mean, sax quartet comes close. I've done a lot of sax quartet playing, but even then it's one of each. It's soprano, alto, tenor, barry. There's no doubling up of altos or whatnot. So yeah, I always find it very fascinating watching the strings to see how they work as a unit and how they're interacting musically with each other.
Yeah, it's complex. It's a set of skills that's developed over many years, which is underrated actually. And I mean, fun fact, not really demonstrated in the audition process. So It's very hard for you to demonstrate how good you are at playing with 15 other people when the audition process is basically a solo endeavor.
Wow. Well, I think too, maybe you could elaborate a little bit on what the audition process is and maybe your thoughts on that. Is there any ideas you have of if you could change the auditions, what you might do differently?
Well, we never stop talking about how we can change the auditions.
Really?
Because, never. We're always striving to make it better, fairer, because often we will have 75 applicants for a second violin audition and not award a place.
Wow.
And we don't like that. We want someone to get the job. Do you know what I mean? But we've made it so that I think MSO is the last orchestra in Australia where the entire thing is conducted behind a giant black curtain and anonymity is retained at every single stage of the process.
Wow. So even the very final stages, it's still
absolutely.
Wow.
All you have is a number. Everyone has a number, even to the point where there's a huge carpet as they walk in. So if you're wearing stilettos or runners or bare feet, we will never know. Yep. We don't know your age. We don't know your gender. We don't know your ethnicity.
Wow.
It's the most fair thing that it can be. And with MSO, anyone's allowed to apply. In other orchestras, they cull like down to a smaller amount from CVs, but obviously admin has to do that because we can't know who they are. I like it. I think it protects their reputation. If they have a bad day, it means that you can keep auditioning, and if you have a bad day, it won't be held against you, especially since you may be on the casual list or you may be an identity. It's the best. Principals are auditioned in a different way because they're on contracts. Concertmasters are on contracts, and that whole thing is public.
Okay.
And they do a recital for the entire orchestra, etc.
Wow.
But it's just, I think it's fair, and it protects us as well because then they don't know who's on the panel. They don't know who to hate that didn't give them the job.
They didn't get it. Okay, so it kind of works.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned about the carpet because that was actually one piece of advice that I remember getting in uni, which was basically wear sneakers or wear like an old school shoe that kind of will sound like almost like a men's shoe as you're walking in, or it will make no sound. Because obviously women's shoes do have a little bit of a click clack with some of them depending on the heel. So the inclusion of a carpet is great because then you actually can wear the shoe you're confident in or comfortable in, and it's not affected, you know. I mean, we obviously had a joke in uni where we all went in barefoot one time to our audition assessment as a bit of a like, well, you said don't care about the shoes, so we all went in barefoot one by one. But
that wouldn't happen in Melbourne. That can only happen. It's so cold here right now.
Yeah. Plus, that was uni, not professional settings. So it's probably good we got that out of our system early. So being part of the orchestra, you've mentioned how your audition solo, and I feel like a lot of people must come to the orchestra having done a lot of solo performance work and thinking of themselves as a soloist in some ways. How do you adjust your playing, or how does one adjust their playing to be part of a section versus being a soloist?
Yeah. So, well, let's just go back to the training, which is you are trained at Conservatorium, as you know, to be a soloist.
Yeah.
And actually, it's absurd because if you're not a soloist by the age of 10, you're not going to be one.
Wow, that's young.
You might, yeah. I mean, you're not going to be an international soloist. Like, this Christian Lee in Melbourne who won the Menowin competition when he was 10 or something ridiculous. Like he's got a solo career and a Decca recording contract. That's what you need. So I'm not sure why we perpetuate this kind of playing Paganini at university, because what pathway are you on? You haven't made it yet to be a soloist as a violinist or probably a pianist.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's way different from for wind players because you can't actually play the oboe when you're 10 because your head will explode.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's very different for different families of instruments. But with the violin, there's an expectation. Of course, I am a soloist. I play solo. I've played concertos. I play with my sister concertos and double concertos. I've done it. It's not my whole life, but there's an expectation that you should be able to play in public so that people can hear you, not just in a section.
Yes.
Because you never know when there's going to be a solo or you might play chamber music, even in the MSO, in the context of that. But, I think that's another thing that's changed over the last 20 years. There's institutions are trying to give their students more professional development around curation and programming and putting on a concert and playing chamber music is become a bit more important in certain institutions, and playing an orchestra has become more important in certain institutions because, frankly, you're going to be so lucky to get a job in an orchestra as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Surely the numbers are higher for playing in an orchestra than having a freelance solo violin career all over the world. So the focus should be much more firmly on that. And to answer your question, when they come into the audition, like you'll hear a fantastic solo player, which is great because you have to play two pieces, one set that one's a Mozart concerto in our case, and another is a movement of another concerto. Mm-hmm. But then we have a bunch of excerpts, which I'm sure you know what excerpts are.
Yes.
Excerpts, they're a tiny little bit taken out of a very famous piece that's very, very hard.
Yes.
And that will cull the people who can't play certain things, but also the excerpts are a really nice range of something that's slow with a beautiful sound, something that's got really complex time, counting, rhythm.
Yeah.
Something that shows a really big, huge, meaty sound, like a Tchaikovsky or a Strauss or something meaty. Mm-hmm. There'll be little tiny bits of Beethoven and Mozart that look easy on the paper and are so hard because you've got to play them perfectly. You know that they bring you down. Beethoven scherzos bring people down. Mozart, anything brings people down.
Yeah.
That really shows that the next level of finesse and control. Yeah. So, there's a whole range of things that go into making an excerpt book for an audition, and they have to be different every time, obviously. It's a good idea, and it's fun setting them. I've always thought we should put Hedwig from Harry Potter.
Oh, really?
Because it's the hardest thing I've ever played on the violin.
Wait, what? No, really?
Go back and revisit it.
Okay.
You can play it. You can play it as my intro music.
Oh, that would be great. Just try and put it underneath as we're talking right now.
The hardest thing.
Really?
For example, my child, when we were doing Harry Potter 1 for the first time, because MSO plays a lot of movies live to the orchestra's there, live to the film. It is actually one of my most favourite things to do because it's symphonic, glorious music by John Williams usually, or some other fabulous composer.
Yep.
And it's not Tchaikovsky again. And they're my favourite films, and they make us a fortune. The films make us 4 times more in a week than a normal concert will. The films are keeping us alive.
That's amazing.
Absolutely amazing. They are keeping us alive in MSO. So my daughter Matilda, she was so funny. I practiced Hedwig for like 6 weeks before the first thing. Oh. And I very often don't practice for work because if I see a program I've played a million times, I don't need to practice. I can turn up and play it. But Hedwig is the hardest thing for the violin, and it's glorious. It's like the hardest etude. It's like the hardest study. It's as hard as Paganini. And you've got to play it with 30 people, with 29 other people, and it's got to be perfect.
Okay, so I need to watch the movie again or something because I can't picture it in my head. Is it the timing or the intonation or just the notes?
It's 3,000 million notes, and it's wonderful. It's Hedwig flying music.
Okay.
I can't even sing it. It's too fast.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I've got to watch the movie again after this.
Absolutely wonderful. And my child Matilda was like, Mum, why are you practicing? Because I didn't usually practice.
Yeah,
I said, well, because this is incredibly difficult, really wonderful. It's good for my technique, and I just want to get it right. You know what I mean? I don't want Hedwig to get the better of me.
I think that mindset that we musicians get into, and a lot of creatives when they're trying to get something right or they're trying to make something happen, that's a really powerful mindset. I often try and draw on that in other points of my life of that I'm going to get it right and I'm going to work on it. How do you go, like when you are preparing music for orchestral settings, it sounds like you're going from I've played this a lot so I'm good all the way to I really need to figure this out. What is that like for you? What is your process when you are practicing and you're preparing?
Well, if anyone younger is listening to this, they won't be happy with my answer. It's better actually not to practice something hard. It's better to look at it and work it out with your brain.
Mental practice. Okay.
Way better, because it is a monumental waste of time to practice something over and over and over again. It's not only a waste of time, it practices in the wrong thing. Right. So unless you understand what you're doing. So I don't know what it's like on the saxophone, but in terms of the violin, we've got a number of problems. Let's just call them issues. Let's not call them problems. Let's call them challenges, Emma.
Violin challenges.
A big challenge is shifting.
Yeah.
We have to shift from there to there, and we have to be in the same place at the same time. Well, we can't do that, can we? No. So we have to smoke and mirrors it. You have to know how to shift. And so in your mind, you have to know that there is a shift coming up. So the shift is the event, right?
Yeah.
There's an event, and you've got a bunch of music here and a bunch of music here, and the shift is there. So you have to know that the shift is coming. You have to practice this over and over again so it's a unit. And then you have to practice that over and over again so it's a unit. But then the shift is the event, and the shift is what's going to bring you down. And you have to know that.
Right.
Otherwise, you just keep slogging away, and it'll be bad for ages. And then there's intonation.
Yes, wow.
Which, when you don't play the piano or the marimba, is an issue.
It's the bane of everyone's existence. I feel like I live with the tuning CD turned on. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a bit of a wind thing, but it's a fabulous CD full of drones, and you can just play whatever you want over the top of the drones and check your intonation. And there's so there's a CD for 440 and then for 441 and then for 442. And as a saxophone player, I feel like all I do and all I talk about with my students is intonation.
Yeah. Well, that's really fascinating. And, you know, a way to stop wasting time on intonation is to understand it, and that it really obeys the laws of physics. Yes. And there's not too many rules. And what you need to do is play with other humans that aren't equal temperament, fixed pitch, to understand how intonation works. I could go on about this for an hour and a half.
I'm sure you could.
I won't. But I mean, really, if there's any violinists or any any flexibly pitched instruments listening, just listen to me very carefully, right? An octave isn't even in tune when you've got an octave on the violin. The top has to be a little bit flatter than the bottom. I have just saved you another 10 years of practice.
Brilliant.
Major thirds have to be flat. Minor thirds have to be sharp. The only equal temperament interval, Emma?
The only equal to I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Is it tritone? Because it's half an octave.
Oh, it doesn't count now because I was going to say that. I was thinking tritone, and then I was like, it's been a while since I've thought about that, so I just don't want to say the wrong thing.
The devil's interval. Yes.
Oh my gosh. But I mean, but even bringing up the thirds, I was just working with some students last week at MOST, which is a Education Queensland program, that you're probably aware of, and was working with the saxophone section, and we were tuning some chords, and we had a play around with thirds and kind of, bringing this one down and bringing this one up, and seeing their reaction to, oh, wait, wow, that actually sounds more in tune now. But, maybe I'm not perfect with the tuner in front of me, because they all had, and I love and hated it, they all had tuning apps on their phone, on their stand, which is great in theory, but not great in practice.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it is. They're a section trying to play together. That's
fine when you have to play with the piano. So that's a different thing you have to learn separately.
Correct.
But again, you can practice it for 20 years or you can know it.
Yeah.
And the knowing of it,
the
awareness of it means that, you've saved so many hours. Like we just, and no one's going to give you a medal for doing 6 hours practice a day. I'm telling you that.
No,
but people are going to hire you if you play in tune. You get that shift.
In tune and with good rhythm. I feel like that's what's gotten me hired as a saxophone player over other people in different circumstances, or has given me my reputation.
Let's be very careful when we talk about rhythm, shall we, Emma?
Why do you say that?
Because probably the least artistic, least storytelling, least accurate thing as a musician is to play rhythmically.
Interesting perspective.
But then there's a caveat, which is you have to have amazingly good, perfect rhythm to know in what way you're going to change it to be able to tell stories.
That's a really interesting way of saying
it. Don't want it because, okay, of course, to pass that audition, you have to have that good rhythm. To be in an ensemble and not be a complete nightmare, you have to have good rhythm, right? Yes. But then what you need to know about rhythm is that it needs to serve gesture and phrasing.
Yes.
So how many times in your life have you, I'll give you an example. There's pizzicato movement in Tchaikovsky 4, which goes dun 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 dun, and it's got crescendos, and then it's got diminuendos. And every time there's a crescendo, everybody rushes. Why? Because it's momentum. Yep. It's a thing that goes somewhere. It has its own power. It has its own thing that it wants to go there.
Yep.
And then when music gets softer, very often the tension's being released. So you want to slow down. You can feel the air coming out of the balloon. So why on earth would we struggle? Okay, kids, this is advanced. Just do what your teacher says and practice with the metronome. But eventually, why would we struggle against the forces of nature and the forces of narrative?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like you and then see, again, in order to be efficient in your practice, you have to know what the high point, or I call it the magnet of the phrase is, so you can go towards and away from that.
I call it the most important note of the phrase when I'm talking about finding,
Yeah.
But I think,
And then so bringing it back into the orchestral context, which is what we're talking about, how do 100 people play together? Because some composer has written something that inevitably goes to this point and it's just so intense and so excellent and you're all drawn towards it. And some conductor hopefully is smart enough and enough of an artist and a philosopher and a poet to understand that. And then the composer explains to the orchestra, who probably they don't necessarily need to be explained to that much because they've played it a million times, or they speak Strauss, or they speak Debussy, or they speak Mozart, or they speak Tchaikovsky, because every composer is like a language, actually.
Yeah.
And they've got different inflections and different dialects and different gestures.
Yes.
And then the conductor will say, this goes to this point.
Okay.
And everyone will go, oh, okay. And then so the whole thing will go to there, and then it'll have a natural release. Or the conductor will be a moron and say, stop rushing.
Oh.
And then you have some people digging their heels in and going, must not rush, and other people just playing normally and feeling like they've done something bad for being good musicians. This is a perennial problem with ensemble. But I have to say, just in a nutshell, the first thing you have to do is identify your phrasing and where things go, and, you know, the tension and release, which is really easy in Baroque music because it's like something that's not consonant harmonically, and then something that's consonant. And then you know that that's the point to go to, the stress, and then the release. And then you can play all Baroque music. There is no more mystery to it. And that, because everybody was influenced by that, really, that goes to all tonal music, I think, really, harmonically wise. So it's not that hard. It's actually not that hard, but it has to be a priority over metronome and, you know, have to play together. If you tell a human that they have to play together with somebody, they get so self-conscious that they can't possibly do it. The tension in the body and the mind will mean that there'll be no flow, no gesture, no psychokinesis even of the shared intention of where to go. Yeah. So, yeah, like any ensemble problem for me in my life can be completely solved immediately by a shared vision of what we're doing. Yeah. So that doesn't involve a metronome.
No, it doesn't. But you've touched on well, you've touched on so many things that, one, I feel like I talk about in my own practice, but two, that I think are just really important for music students to understand. You know, I've had conversations with students where they'll listen to a brilliant recording, let's say, of the Glazunov saxophone concerto, and they can hear the player pulling things around. Maybe it isn't perfect rhythmically. Maybe there is some movement through the phrase, which makes sense and is very musically well-intentioned. So then they give it a go, and then I come along and say, mate, you're really out of time there. And they're trying to figure out, well, I'm just trying to do what I heard on the recording and experiment, but then they almost go too far in the other direction and say, now suddenly, you know, mate, that's not going to work with the accompanist. Like, that's just so out of time. So where is that sweet spot? And it's about giving students working with them to develop their ears and their ideas to understand that, and to understand that concept of following the gesture, following what the music's telling you without completely pulling it apart and losing your accompanist 2 bars down the track.
Exactly. Yeah.
Look, let's pivot a little bit to some of your chamber music, because you've obviously done a lot of that and have the fabulous Plexus Ensemble. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about your work with them.
Yeah, baby. We started Plexus. Well, full disclosure, I have a life partner called Stefan Casamenos, and he is an extraordinary concert pianist and composer and chamber musician, and he does an amazing Excel spreadsheet as well. Oh. Like he's just a polymath. You know, he's someone who's he's great at writing. He can read ancient Greek. He can speak Mandarin. I mean, he's just one of those really painful people. But so with this secret weapon in my life newly in 2014, I thought, well, it's so hard for a freelance pianist it doesn't matter how great they are. And I'll just put something in parenthesis here, especially if you're Australian in Australia and you haven't studied overseas, then Australia thinks you're garbage, because Australia has a big fat problem with its own cultural identity. But then I'll close my parenthesis and stop soapboxing about that. But I'm glad I got to say it. So we thought, what can we do that'll be really fun and good for us and also help people at the same time? Because, you know, you look around, like I said, when you get older, you look around. You don't look so much here or in the mirror. You look around at the landscape and you think, well, I know all these great composers and they're not getting commissioned because they're not famous. And so once you get famous as a composer, and I'm not dragging, I love them all. Like in Australia, we've got amazing composers that are famous. But what tends to happen is they get commissioned over and over and over again because they're safe, like by people who either don't have so much expertise or haven't bothered to go to enough concerts and hear different composers, or actually just jump on their SoundClouds and have a listen to their stuff, in this day and age. So, we bothered to do that and got really excited about this project. Plexus is a trio of violin, piano and clarinet. And while it's an unusual combination, it's kind of, I like thinking of it like it's a mini symphony orchestra.
Oh.
You've got a wind section and a string section, and the piano just can handle the rest.
Perfect. It could technically be percussion with the right preparations.
Well, no, we've played percussion in it. Some composers have written percussion for us to play in it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, fabulous.
And you can do percussion on any instrument, like clarinet kickflips, and all over the violin and all over the piano. And so we formed partly in homage to my violin teacher in America, Walter Vedette at Michigan State University, because he had a violin, piano, clarinet trio for about 30 years. And before he started commissioning work for that combination, there were, I think, 8 existing pieces.
8?
So he commissioned,
Wow,
there was
that's so
Bartok
cute.
Contrasts, a Mio trio, a Stravinsky Soldier's Tale version.
Okay.
I can't list them all now, but a little tiny piece by Berg.
Oh, wow, that's very few.
There were just hardly any.
Yeah.
So he commissioned way over 220 pieces.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible.
And basically created a genre. And he's just retired, and we thought they may retire soon, but we just thought we'd carry on their work and be inspired by them.
Amazing.
And it's a very handy combination because Philip Arkenstall, who is a god among clarinet players, plays E flat clarinet, all the clarinets, bass clarinet, and the saxophone.
Incredible.
And the basset horn. So he's very, very useful.
Yes.
So, so we've always just gone to, I started out with my friends. So I started out with Rob Davidson.
Oh, I just saw him yesterday. He's fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah. And because we went through the conservatorium together, we were in the same class.
Oh, I didn't realize. Oh, wow.
And I just think he's a fab composer. So I started with the friends and just kept going. And we've commissioned over 110 pieces now in 10 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Combo and premiered them. The challenge is to play them again. So we've played them again and again and again. Yep. We've had a lot of opportunities. We've made a lot of opportunities for ourselves. Here's the fun bit, which probably people won't like, but not one single cent of government or grant money.
That's what I was wondering, and I wanted to ask you about, because a lot of young players are being really aware of working with composers, and I've seen some fabulous students coming out of universities that have made sort of friendships with the composition department, and they're helping each other through. How do you do it without going for a grant, going for government funding?
Well, I'm going to be ageist again and say my address book is enormous because I'm old and I've met lots and lots of people. Okay. But I also love going to parties and I love going to concerts. And when you go to lots of concerts, then you get invited to more concerts and then they invite you to interval drinks. And when you go to interval drinks, you get to meet people. And then you see the people over and over and over and over again. And then you become part of family. I would not expect a first-year conservatorium student to have access to the incredible pool of wonderfully enlightened donors that have supported our exercise and endeavour.
Okay.
So, but on the other hand, I wish I'd had this mindset when I was in first year at the conservatorium because we had no idea about any of it. And then it helps running other things like Port Fairy Spring Music Festival, which I run with Stefan in Southwest Victoria, that has a lot of donors. And then I'm also involved with Musica Viva. I'm on the National Advisory Council of Musica Viva, and that has a lot of donors. Yes. And I've been at the MSO for 26 years, and that has a lot of donors. And I've been involved with Victorian Opera for many years, and that has a lot of donors. And all these donors are the same people as each other.
Interesting.
Especially in Melbourne. So also in Melbourne, there's an incredible culture of philanthropy and giving. There are big families it's just in their family culture to give to the arts. It's Incredible. So maybe it's harder to compare the landscape here with other cities in Australia.
But I think the takeaway for younger musicians then from your experience is to learn how to network, how to be involved in the musical community of their city and, you know, go to events, go to concerts and not be afraid to say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a clarinetist, I'm a whatever. Those skills, that ability to talk to people is undoubtedly something that has helped you and has probably helped other people that are working with philanthropic kind of families or groups, I can imagine.
Yeah. Look, I just love a party. I'm an okay. I'll go to the opening of an envelope, Emma.
Oh, well, yes, but I think you're,
But then there's another aspect to it where when you realize that they're all the same people, it's the same pool of people, and it's no coincidence that the names keep coming up on donor lists because they're incredibly enlightened people and they have the means and they're choosing to use their means to support artists and foster artistic endeavours and projects. Okay. And so instead of being just an idiot about it, and I really want to talk about this later, and being competitive and holding people close to yourself, like I tend to do the opposite. So if I have a plexus donor, I do have a plexus donor who I've introduced to, well, I love her. I can't believe she's been supporting us ever since. And why? Wow. Because you just have to have a good story. I mean, see here we're talking about privilege again because plexus has never been, the three members of the trio have never been paid for a rehearsal or an engagement because we've set it up so that any money that we get, ticket sales or donations or anything, goes into the pool for the composers, for the commissions. Okay. So not everybody can do this because I've got a fat job in the MSO. Phil has a fat job in the MSO. And Stefan is an incredible concert pianist who's just come back from playing in a festival in Sussex in England. You know what I mean? So it's not really a model that everybody can, I mean, you could aim for it, but then you would have to be enough of an idiot to choose not to get paid for the hours of work.
Yes. So if there's trade-offs. Yeah.
Well, not an idiot, but peculiar type of person. And because of that narrative, then the people who donate to Plexus feel that they're almost making a match donation because of the, like the story is so much stronger. Yes. There's such a strong commitment from us that they're really happy to align with that and support something that isn't 100% not for profit, except for underrepresented composers in this country.
Wow. That's an incredible mission for the group as well. The music you're leaving behind you, like you said, 110 compositions by Australian composers that are there for this group, this format that is not as common. How incredible.
Well, I mean, it was just a really fun project. You know what ended up happening? As usual, when you have kind of non-self-serving, especially monetary motivations for doing things, all these things happen. It's incredible. There's value in so many other aspects of life. What happened was that I became a way better violinist, way better, because I had to practice these unplayable things and play them for live broadcasts in the Melbourne Recital Centre, broadcast by the ABC. Okay. Yeah, it was terrifying. Yeah, I had to do so much practice because I've been sitting in a symphony orchestra for ages and I could play all of those things and I could practice for those things. But this was totally different. It's like exposed, solo, unbelievably complicated things, and sometimes unidiomatic writing, which we love a challenge.
Yeah, I've had that a few times.
That was an incredible takeaway for us. We ended up in the Melbourne Prize for Music finals.
Oh, my goodness.
A couple of years after we'd started. And then all of a sudden, we just started getting profile, I guess. Like people had heard of us for our mission, the thing that we started so that we could just help, and celebrate the amount of composers in this country and how much they've got to say and how incredibly brilliantly they have to say it.
Oh,
so
wow.
When you do something for no money, I mean, I'll probably never own a house, but whatever.
That's okay.
Can't live in debt, whatever.
Okay.
I don't know. It depends on your own priorities. But if you only do things for money, you'll only get money.
Interesting. Are you able to maybe shout out a couple of the composers that you can think of the top of your head for people to go? I really put you on the spot, so please feel free to.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Just for people to go look up some SoundClouds.
They're all on our website. We've really loved playing music by Rob Davidson, by Nat Barch. Paul Dean wrote us a fantastic piece. Maria Grenfell, absolutely beautiful. Michael Kieran Harvey was insane and almost unplayable. Paul Grabowski wrote us an incredible thing that was almost unplayable.
Oh, wow.
We've had a few people from overseas, a beautiful Polish composer, Andrei Karolov, and that's when he got Phil to play those beautiful antique cymbals.
Oh, okay.
Epic. Eleanor Katz-Chernin wrote us 4 of the best tangos you've ever heard in your entire life.
Wow.
A couple of years ago. And, as we get more profile, it's easy to have access to that level of composer who's super busy and everything. Richard Mills wrote us a stunning thing for tenor and plexus. We've collaborated with a lot of associate artists. Have to shout out Thomas Green, who is one of my favourite composers ever.
He's mine as well.
A fantastic piece as well. Look, I can't. There's just too many.
But it's all on the Plexus website if people want to kind of go through the archives.
Kelly Greenaway. It's just, they're great. All of them have just the most extraordinary individual voices. And then they express themselves at a point in time as well. Yes. Like the Grabowski piece was nothing like you would expect to see him at Jazz Lab or, it was nothing like that. It was a serious kind of primal scream of a piece.
Wow.
You just never know what they're going to come up with. And because we're completely not prescriptive, we just say, you do exactly what you want.
Okay.
And we'll play it for you.
Wow. They can go in any direction they like.
Mm-hmm. I feel really bad now that I've probably missed out. Like, they're all my favorites.
Oh, I totally put you on the spot, and it's impossible to remember 110 names.
Yeah. Alan Zavod wrote us a great piece, which we play heaps.
Oh,
he was in, what's his name? That lunatic in America. Frank Zappa's band.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah. He wrote us a fantastic piece that we played a lot. Yeah, we've got just this huge
catalogue.
Landscape of, it's just so many pieces, and we revisit them as much as we can and play them again and again.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. And because of Plexus, then composers started writing music for me and Stefan as well for a duo, because we play a lot of recitals. In fact, the recitals kept us alive in lockdown. 262 days of lockdown.
That's my next thing I was going to ask you about is obviously being a Melbourne musician. How did the pandemic go as an artist in Melbourne in all those lockdowns, in some really, really trying times?
Well, I think we've talked about it a lot, and I might get triggered from the PTSD, but I'll just say a couple of things. One was that Stefan and I personally were saved by the Melbourne Digital Concert Hall. And because we lived together, we were able to actually perform there at the Athenaeum Theatre through various stages of lockdown.
Yeah.
We were actually saved by that.
Oh, that's
incredible. Was amazing. They rebranded as Australian Digital Concert Hall. I'm sure everybody knows.
Yeah.
But, if you want to support something that really does and did support artists in a time of great crisis, then you consider. And if I sound like I work for them, but I don't. But if you can buy the subscription where you've got access to every concert that they've ever streamed, which is probably thousands by now.
Wow.
So it's just an idea. It's a treasure trove. Anyway, we're incredibly grateful to them. We're grateful to lots of people who just put food, like Coles vouchers in our letterbox walking by.
Oh, that's so special.
Because
So
we
lovely.
knew, and Victorian Opera gave us supermarket vouchers as well. Anyone who'd worked for Victorian Opera previously.
Wow, that's a wonderful thing as a company to do for
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
musicians, the people that bring the music to life, quite literally.
Because I was stood down without pay. Um,
Oh, no.
Melbourne, as everybody knows,
Yep.
the only orchestra in Australia that was stood down without pay. And fortunately, we all had job seeker. I'm a keeper, sorry, job keeper. We all
Okay.
had job
Yep.
keeper. So, and you couldn't go out to dinner anymore. So you saved tons of money on glamorous Melbourne dinners.
That's true.
And,
The
you
Melbourne
know,
lifestyle became that much
and
cheaper.
bottles of wine in Melbourne restaurants, which are marked up about, 300%. So, yeah, when you don't really do anything and you make all your own food, you save an awful lot of money, we realized.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got through. The other silver lining of COVID for me personally was that Matilda was doing year 11 and 12.
Okay.
And so she was one of those that copped it both years in Melbourne. But she's a bit of an introvert and she loves studying, so she loved being at home. And I got her to cook. I got to cook her breakfast, lunch, and dinner for basically 2 years at a stage of her life where you would usually not see your child because they're independent.
Yeah.
And they're out and they're studying and busy, and you're out and busy because you don't need to look after them anymore. So it was a real gift, actually. I feel that
to have time together.
Yeah, there's always some other outcome that balances, or there's always an unexpected outcome that makes things better. Plus, I did a lot of practice for the first time in ages.
Yes, I actually picked up the trumpet. That was my lockdown.
Wow, amazing.
Lockdown thing. So coming out of it creatively, how have the last sort of year or year and a bit gone for you? Was it an immediate feeling of just wanting to get stuck into projects and ideas and new music, or was it a bit of a slow burn getting back to, sort of wherever you are now?
The former. It was horrendous. It was worse than even before.
Oh.
It was so busy because you had a normal schedule plus reschedules.
Wow. So just
horrendous. And that's like for MSO, really struggled to reschedule all the things that had to be postponed.
Yeah.
And every company had that issue. Wow. So Stefan's been working like a lunatic he does naturally, but just, all the reschedules, trying to fit them all in and try and do them justice and have enough practice time and have enough travel time. And yeah, it's been full on. It seems like last year was definitely the most I think anyone had worked. And that includes, crew and admin and everything. Yeah. It just pelted everybody because a normal workload is, a normal workload. And then to have on top of that layers of rescheduling and you're trying to squeeze everything in and projects that you had on the boil, and it was really, and it's still pretty full on this year, but not as bad as last year.
Oh, wow. Do you think it'll slow down or it'll keep a pretty high pace for you the next year or so?
Well, one does have the power to choose one's own adventure. So one can slow it down by saying no to some things or adjusting things and having more time to do the other things maybe more properly and, less stressfully deadline-wise and everything. So after last year, I've definitely made some changes in my life that mean I've got more room to do things rather than living like this.
Deadline to deadline, gig to gig. Yeah.
Got to practice, got to write that, got to write this, got to do that, got to go to that.
Yeah. I hear you. Look, there's one other topic that I'd love to touch on before we finish, and that's, of course, you come from a very well-known, or at least in Queensland, a very well-known musical family. And I'd love to know, one, a little bit of what it was like to grow up in such a musical family, and two, what that's like now, because you have very prominent musical siblings as well, as you mentioned, your sister and your concertos. So I'd love to hear about that.
Sure. Well, growing up in a musical family is normal because you're growing up in it and you think that that's normal.
The way it is.
Because that's your life. It's only when you are grown up that you realize that it wasn't normal. What is normal anyway? But it wasn't standard kind of, So Yeah. Dad tried to make me play the violin when I was 5, and I basically just yelled at him and said, I'm not doing that. So bless.
Oh, okay.
People might know that Dad was actually an architect.
No, I don't. Do you want to just speak a little bit about your dad's legacy?
So this might explain some of his motivations and passion about the whole thing, actually, because he wasn't allowed to do music. I mean, he was allowed to play the violin as a kid, whatever, through school. But when it came to going to university, his father said, no, you're not being an artist. There's no future in that. You won't get any money. Forget about it. You've got to have a real career. So Dad chose architecture and went to UQ. Okay. And then his dad said, well, now you go to Rome and study post-grad. And so he got to Rome, and there were not really any phones or internet or social media. So Dad went straight to Switzerland to study the violin until his dad found out.
Oh, and then wow.
Money, he had to come scuttling back to Rome. Anyway, so my dad's father died when he was 33, when Dad was 33. And he just stopped being an architect right then and put the brick on the accelerator. He'd been moonlighting, playing violin, conducting, doing a lot of conducting, and still having lessons up until his, like, all through his 30s and everything. But he just dropped the whole thing and became a full-time musician.
Wow.
Which is a little bit late. But he always had, I guess, an amateur sensibility to him, where everything he did was for the love of it or for a reason. He formed the Queensland Youth Orchestra in 1967, and to quote him, to give those children something to do in the dangerous years, unquote.
The dangerous years.
Yeah, so when kids are all hormonal and can feel really alienated, and especially arty kids who fall through the cracks all the time in our culture, where if you're not good at sport or STEM, you're an arty kid. Yeah. You might be the only arty kid in the schoolyard with your violin, and thank goodness for Australian Youth Orchestra and National Music Camp and things like that, where you get every lone kid in the schoolyard with the violin coming together with 250 other kids, and finally they have a tribe, and any kind of behavioural or depression, it's just unbelievable how music heals children, young adults of that age, and brings them together and gives them a tribe and gives them a shared sense of purpose and meaning, and it's completely transformative, and he knew that. Plus he wanted to conduct, so he had to make his own orchestra.
It worked. He conducted a very long time.
So he was mad. He was great. He was obsessed. He was completely committed to the orchestra. Professional orchestras would say, could you conduct this week? And he'll say, no, I'll have to miss Saturday morning. I can't do that. I can't miss my Saturday morning cure. So,
wow, I didn't know that.
He did conduct a lot of professional orchestras, but never
not if it compromised.
A professional conductor, because he completely prioritised his first commitment.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So we all grew up with that. So any given time, there might be 120 people just descend on our house for a function or something. Mum and Dad had these cute soirees at home. So you'd be growing up and there'd be music in the house. It was just relaxed, but it was all about music, because Mum's a fantastic pianist and singer, and in her later years she's become a poet as well. And a bit of a
incredible.
Yeah, amazing. But she's busy with 5 kids. So there were 5 kids, and so I'm me in the MSO. My sister's in the first violins of MSO, which means she's better than me.
I'm sure she'll like hearing that. Oh.
And she had me to compete with, you know what I mean? Like there was I'm going to get better than her, and she definitely did. And then there's Dan, who plays cello, and he plays in Brandenburg. And then there's Johnny, who was an excellent keyboard player and singer, and decided not to go in that direction. So he does IT now. We call him the white sheep of the family.
The white sheep, that's adorable.
And then there's Dave, who's equally is just a fantastic violinist and violin teacher and an orchestral player, and he also writes music for video games. Living the dream, Dave.
Wow.
That's amazing. And it's really fun. Yeah. But, like when I said before at the beginning, it's a bubble. It's just a bubble of privilege, the way the dice roll for where you're born and with whom. And so, yeah, we had a really good time. Lots of parties, lots of music.
Special.
Yeah.
Special.
I mean, but everybody should have this. Everybody should have access to music. That's why in Queensland, you have the definite advantage over the rest of the country with your instrumental music in the curriculum.
I agree.
You have a senior lecturer at Griffith University who comes from Mount Isa. Mm-hmm. That does not happen in Victoria or pretty well many other states. I mean, New South Wales is fantastic because it has 17 regional conservatoriums and Victoria has 0. Even Queensland has more. You want to talk what I'm doing? I'm building the first regional conservatorium in Victoria.
Oh, wow.
Warrnambool. We've been at it for 4 years. We're going extremely well and it will happen. But really, again, it's not going to be, the government hasn't seen it as a priority in their overall policy making. So if you want something done, you just have to go out and do it yourself. And the community is beyond excited about it. And like I said, there's value in more than just money. Like if we all waited to have enough money to do a project, then nothing would be done, as you know.
Correct. Yeah.
So we're doing that. That's what we're doing.
Oh, that's incredible.
It will be done.
It will be. Well, I mean, I'd like to say, it'll be done by the time this episode comes out, but it might be a little longer than that, I can imagine. a little longer. Look, Monica, I have 3 questions that I'm finishing all the interviews with, so I'm very excited to get your answers. Mm-hmm. So the first is, what advice do you have for young people looking to get into the classical music industry?
Go in with your eyes open. Don't take it personally that the cab driver thinks you're a hobbyist.
Yep.
Go in knowing that it's incredibly hard work. You already know that because you've already put that into even be considering that. But try not to take cultural things personally. And I'll tell you something else. 3 times more people in Australia, this is a fact from an amazing report by John Daly called Performing Arts Advocacy in Australia. 3 times more people in Australia attend an artistic or cultural event and participate in an artistic or cultural activity than they do a sporting event or activity. Now, that is not reflected on even the ARTI ABC News, where every single news bulletin has a big sports section and, someone has to die for there to be anything about the arts pretty well all the time, unless it's Vivid Festival in Sydney, which is all gorgeous and everything. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
So you have to know that Australians do love and need you as an artist, but it's not going to be necessarily reflected in the media or in the culture. So you have to know that it's going to be a bit of a struggle. You have to know that you're going to have to be doing it just weigh it up. Just weigh it up because you can really be an excellent musician and not have to do it for a living because it's really tough here. Or you can move to Germany where they deeply respect musicians. Or you can, there's plenty of amazing amateur orchestras all over the place and community music, which is somehow the most satisfying to be involved with, actually. Yeah. We do a huge community gala thing at Port Fairy every year, and it's the most meaningful and that's the function of music, is to bring people together and tell stories and give you context about what it is to be a human in the place that you live with the people that you live with. I mean, is it really to just play a Tchaikovsky violin concerto all over the world with orchestra after orchestra after orchestra? I mean, yeah, great. If you can do that, congratulations. But there's so much more to it than that. So I would just say, if you were to go into a music career, just do it with your eyes open. Realize that you will probably have to teach. Yes. So don't be looking down on teachers or teaching as a career. Someone taught you.
It's true.
Have respect.
Very true.
And as soon as you start teaching in earnest, your playing will get so much better because you've had to actually analyze what you do and how you do it and how you've had to problem solve instead of just playing the same thing wrong for 6 hours every day in a practice room going, I did 6 hours practice today. And even though you probably got worse than you already were, do you see how we're coming full circle?
You're doing a very good job at wrapping it all up beautifully for me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Monica.
So don't disrespect teachers or teaching as a profession, even though this country does. It pays the teachers so little and doesn't support them. And we've got a real problem with a supply of music teachers in this country as well, and music in the curriculum. But it's an ecosystem that's broken because of all the different parts that are broken. I could talk about that for a long time. Let's move on. What's your next question?
Well, you've actually touched a little bit on the next question, I think, maybe. But the question is, what don't you think people know about a life in the classical music world?
Physical pain.
Oh, gosh.
Existential pain for the lack of respect that you're shown culturally for so many decades of incredibly hard work. How much fun it is to have a different schedule from everybody else. I'm trying to be positive now, where, your days off are usually Monday, Tuesday, or Sunday, Monday. You go to the supermarket, there's nobody there. It's fantastic. You get to travel a lot for free. I've traveled all over the world a million times. I've been to Uruguay for free. Wow. I've never been to Darwin, but I've been to Uruguay. Isn't that absurd?
A little. It is a little strange.
Yeah. So there's lots of great things about it.
And the final question is, if you had your time over, would you do it all again?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. Okay, so I have to say yes, because otherwise I'm saying that I've just ruined my life by doing the wrong thing. Right? Sure. So if I had a time machine and went back, then I'd change everything. No, I can't. I'm me. This is it. I'm here. I'm loving it and hating it and indifferent about it, but it's what it is. But I guess if we had an alternate universe, then I probably would have maybe liked to do law, to be not to necessarily be a lawyer, but just to have that really excellent command of logic and language and strategy and understanding. I think having a law degree is power, like mental and organizational.
I feel the same way about a business degree. I feel like I do all my career again, but if you could just pop in a little business degree in there, the skills and the mental control,
exactly,
it's the same thing. Yeah,
totally.
I agree.
But see, we could both go and do a law or a business degree now, couldn't we? There's nothing stopping us.
Technically.
Yeah. And the other thing that I would have maybe considered was, I know this is even harder to get a job in than music, but I would have wanted to be some kind of visual art curator because I'm obsessed with paintings and artists and sculptures and art galleries. And I've curated 3 Plexus shows at the National Gallery of Victoria, which was the most incredibly exciting work that I've ever done, responding to an exhibition directly with curation, not only curation of pieces to that exhibition and that artist or that group of artists or that time in history, but also commissioning a new piece for each of those concerts in response to one was MoMA, one was Alexander Calder, the amazing mobiles.
Yes.
And one was the Roger Kemp tapestries in the Great Hall. And so if you could get paid full time for doing that, that's my dream job, working with visual art and music together. That's what I would do differently. But hey, I'm doing that too.
You've got the dream job.
I don't need to go back and do that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your time today, Monica. It's been so special to talk to you. And you have some amazing advice and little pearls of wisdom. So thank you so much.
Thank you.